Have you been told to stop running because you have an injury? Are you wondering if you should stop running if your knees hurt? Does running help with injuries? Is that possible? Welcome to episode 150 on the Healthy Runner podcast, where we help you get stronger, run faster, and enjoy lifelong injury-free running. Today, I have with me a very special guest and colleague of mine, Dr. Nicole Turnbow, who is physical therapist and owner of Body in Motion, a performance-based physical therapy office in Bloomfield, Connecticut. This has been a long time in the making, Nicole. As you know, I knew eventually I was going to get you on the show. So thank you so much for accepting my invite and coming on the show.
You are so welcome, Duane. I am excited to be here.
Yeah, so this is like a topic that I get really excited about, and I know you have a similar passion that I do. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. So running community, Nicole is really going to share her knowledge and expertise on why you don't need to stop running if you are injured. So if you've ever wondered, like, what should you do if you have pain during or after a run? This is a topic we hear often. And if you've ever been in a situation where you're like running and feeling pain and wondering, is this real pain or is this normal soreness? If you tend to ice after every single run, if you're scared to go to the doctor because you don't want them to tell you to stop running. And then lastly, you could be a runner that when you start feeling an ache, you get scared. And it's usually based upon like previous experience and beliefs. And you just like shut it down for a couple of days or a week, and then you start running again. If any of this is you, like this is going to be the training that is going to be extremely helpful. In this episode, it's really going to be like two PTs talking shop, talking running injuries, and some common problems and mistakes many runners are making on how you can overcome these stubborn injuries or this injury cycle and really advance in your running journey and continue to get in those mental clearing runs that you love so much. So, Nicole, on the show, we always start out with a little dynamic warm up, of course, just like we would before our runs. So, can you tell the listeners, where you call home and give us a little bit more backstory on how you've gotten to this point in your running journey and your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for kicking it off, Duane. So, as Duane said, my physical therapy practice is in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and now we call home Burlington, Connecticut. But I am originally from the Boston, Massachusetts area. My running career started probably like a lot of the listeners on here during good old COVID. So I always had an interest in running. Like it really intrigued me, but I was so bad at it, to be honest, that I just did the things that I was good at, like dance, yoga, lifting weights. But when COVID hit, all of my other passions were kind of out the window. I couldn't do any of those things. And I loved being at the gym and I couldn't. So I started running and picking it back up. I had always run like a few miles here and there, but during COVID, I was running like 5 miles a day. It was the only way I could stay active. And as a physical therapist, an extremely active person. Movement is medicine for me. So I started running and I ran with my husband. We got into it. And then we actually ran a half marathon just like on our own during COVID, casually. But during this whole experience, I realized when my husband actually got injured that we were not training properly. Like as a physical therapist, I should have known better. And so I helped Justin, my husband, recover from a hip labral tear that he got during this crazy running journey we had during COVID. And we both started to get really into running. We started looking on YouTube for, tips on running and all the things that new runners do, right? And we stumbled upon a big YouTuber. His name's Nick Bear. Maybe some of you follow him or know him. And he was really inspirational for me and Justin both because he preached this concept called the hybrid athlete. And I love that concept because as a weightlifter, I wanted to continue lifting weights, but I also really wanted to get into running. And Nick Bare basically showed that you could be really good at both. In fact, you'll be better at both if you do both. So we continue to run and we continue to strength train. My husband probably did it a little bit better than I did because he ran Hartford in 2021. And then Nick Bare, our influencer, that we followed, was running the Buffalo Marathon this past May in 2022. So my husband ran that marathon with Nick, and I was so inspired by both of them. And I was in the midst of, developing this practice, this business, that I decided, you know what, I need to practice what I preach and get back to serious training and serious running. So I signed up for the Hartford Half Marathon, and I just did that this past October, and it was by far the best experience I've ever had. And I am so grateful that my running career has come this far and that I've evolved this much. So that's kind of the little bit of the background.
Oh man, I love that. And I love that term, like the hybrid athlete, because I always say that strength training in order to run is like essential part of being a runner, right? So it kind of is the same, messaging in that we need to be that hybrid athlete. Like we need to be in the gym, or we need to do the strength work in order to stay healthy as runners. Um, so that I definitely like that mindset. And yeah, you crushed Hartford. We were able to see each other there, which was awesome.
Yeah, that
And
was awesome.
yeah, so proud of you that you did so great for your first half marathon. And like you went through that whole training cycle with like knowing how to train properly and not get injured along the way. And I think it really does speak to your level of strength and fitness that you had for years leading up to really taking on running, these last 2 years. Let's say, now you're a quote unquote runner, right? It always takes us a while to actually call ourselves that. But it really speaks to, how strong that you are and that you've prepared your body, for actual running.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely like that term hybrid athlete really resonates with me. But you and I, as physical therapists, we preach that quote unquote term, hybrid athlete all day, every day. That's our backbone of what we do as coaches, as physical therapists. And I am definitely grateful that I did so much strength training leading up to the Hartford half, because I definitely do think it made me that much more resilient. I had that foundation, which, like you said, set me up for success.
Yeah. So now that you've become this kind of newer runner, like many have since COVID, and you've now accomplished your first half marathon, I'm kind of curious to see, will you be going back for seconds? Will you be continuing to kind of go along this running journey?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Now that the winter's approaching here in Connecticut, I think I'm going to just take a step back and do maybe 1 to 2 runs per week, running 3 to 10 miles at most per week. And definitely going to focus on that foundational strength for the winter months at least. And then, come late winter, early spring, think about maybe running either the half Hartford half again or even another race next year, hopefully. But definitely in the realm of possibilities again, because the way I felt after Hartford, I can see how it's very addicting.
Yeah, I know. You get that medal, right? You get that like runner's high. You're like, wow, I accomplished this. Like, let's see if we can do it better next time, right?
Yeah, all about the PRs.
You
The
just get
next
that little
best.
competitive spirit. Yeah. But I love how you have already, started to look at training cycles and like, hey, this is winter. I'm really doubling down on strength. I will definitely be doing that as well. And I think it's right where you are in your running journey of like, how much running you're doing. And then as someone progresses, so if there are listeners out there that have been doing this for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you've been combining strengthening with running, you might not need to back off as much running because your base is already a little bit higher than like where yours is, for example, right? Like your mileage. But I love that you've already thought about this kind of training cycles. In winter, you're going to double down on strength. And yeah, this morning was actually the first time I got back to my deadlifts in the gym. It felt
Love it.
so good. Oh my goodness, after like the marathon. So at the time of this recording, guys, I am officially just outside of 4 weeks of the marathon. So there's like week 5. So now I'm officially like not in marathon recovery. So I'm at like this transition point. And it was the first time that I actually felt like I got like a pump in the gym. I was like, ooh, this is nice.
It's
Like,
so nice.
oh,
I can
that
resonate
feeling.
with that. Totally, Duane. I
That-
get it. The first time I stepped back into the gym seriously after this training cycle, it just felt so good. I'm like, oh, I missed this. Right. So they're
yeah.
both so great. Running and strength training are both amazing feelings, and you still get that high just in different ways.
Yeah. So, that's a little bit about like, learning about you as I'm going to say newer runner, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
These
Sure.
past 2 years, but definitely not someone who was a couch potato, right? Like you were definitely active. And, you have your own clinic now. And can you just share a little bit about like what made you want to start your own clinic? And, for those who are listening and let's say they can't see you and can see that you are visually younger than I am, of course, how many years were you into your physical therapy career before you were starting to think like, hey, I think I want to maybe, do this on my own?
So, Duane will admit, I have always dreamed of having this physical therapy practice. Duane was my professor at Quinnipiac and still is a huge mentor for me. And you and I had so many talks back in the Quinnipiac days, like, I'm gonna do this. I want to own a practice. It's like in my blood. So I actually only practiced for 3.5 years before I decided to leave the corporate physical therapy world and open my own practice. And it's been quite the wild ride in all the best ways.
Yeah. Why? And I do remember definitely, conversations with you as a student. And um, I always knew back then, like, and I told you this, before, but I always knew back then, like, you were going to do big things in the profession, and like just to see where you are now and what you're doing, and we can get into like the content that you share on social media, which is just amazing and just so helpful for the public as a whole. To learn about movement and learn about staying physically active, but what really made you kind of say like, what, this corporate PT thing is just not for me. Like I can't see myself doing this for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go into work every day and have a crazy caseload. I'd be seeing anywhere between 2 and 4 patients per hour. And, as a performance based athlete myself, it was really hard to have that type of caseload and not be able to give people my undivided attention, that one on one support that a lot of people really, truly not only deserve, but need. It was kind of discouraging to me too that I went to school for so many years, got my doctorate degree, had all this education under my belt, and I couldn't really put my manual skills to really good true use. And I couldn't do the corrective exercises that I wanted to do with each and every person that came in the office. So I was just getting burnt out, honestly, with traditional physical therapy. And, if you're a listener on the podcast and you've been to physical therapy before, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've been to that traditional PT office where, you're surrounded by many other people and, your physical therapist just gives you a piece of paper and says, go do these at home. And there's really no accountability around it. I picked up all of the flaws of that traditional model and I just wanted a better life, not only for me, but for my clients. I wanted to revolutionize healthcare and take all the flaws that I experienced in traditional healthcare and just totally change it. And I feel like that's exactly what we're doing at Body in Motion. Just feels so good every day to know that we're really making a positive change. We're working with all of our clients on a one-on-one basis. We have a digital app where we're coaching our clients and keeping them accountable for their home exercise program. We're continuing to communicate beyond just that 1-2 sessions that we have per week. It's just that whole holistic approach that we take to physical therapy that you really can't get at a traditional clinic.
Oh my goodness, I love that term, revolutionize healthcare. Yes. And I love that you've done that, not only for yourself, honestly, from like a professional standpoint and being able to like grow and like you said, actually have time with patients to actually, grow in your skill set and, in your clinical reasoning process and like all the things that we do as skilled, right, physical therapists that sometimes in those other settings, quite frankly, you don't have the time for, right? And you feel like you're just like a game manager and like just kind of like you do these exercises, you do those exercises. Hey, you get off the pulleys, come on over here, hop on the table. I'm going to move your shoulder around, right? Like you turn into like just these random I guess treatments or interventions that we do as physical therapists. So I love that you've taken that ownership and was like, hey, you know what? Like I'm going to continue to advance in this model, but then also, right, like your athletes like deserve so much more, right? And they deserve more. And I just love that you've taken that step. And honestly, so early in your career, which is amazing. And I just love that because as you know, my story, like it took me a lot longer, pretty much 15 years into my career to finally make that leap and jump. But, nowadays it's so much easier with technology and to, like you said, help people all over the world virtually is pretty amazing. And I love the accountability piece because that is key. Like I found that myself is just that support and accountability that you normally would not have, right, with your traditional physical therapist where you see them either once a week or you go in twice a week and or like you go in and see a different therapist every single time you go in, which I've never understood that model. But right, like how is there accountability? How are you continuing along kind of the goals, right, that you need for that individual? So I love that you've kind of brought all of those elements into how you help patients at Body in Motion.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, I do think it is easier for me, 15 years that it took you. I think it's definitely a lot easier for me because I was able to grow on social media and I was able to find a digital app to utilize at my practice. Like these types of things weren't as readily available or as easy to help you grow your business back in 15 years ago, right? Like as it is today. It's so easy to create content. Well, maybe not so easy, but it's easier to create content now and be able to acquire clients from all over the world and have this digital app where I can communicate with clients and keep them accountable and have all my videos uploaded there. So, there is definitely something to be said about that and just making it easier to run this hybrid practice that I run.
Yeah, I just love it, and I'm super proud of you from being a former professor, and it just makes me like so happy of seeing your growth and where you are at this stage. But I will get off of my like feeling proud professor soapbox right now, and I'm sure many of the people who tuned into this hopefully got to appreciate some of your backstory, where you come from a PT standpoint, how you work with clients, yourself, coming along this running journey. So for all of the runners that you've helped throughout your PT career, let's get into this whole like running injury topic. And, one of the, most common questions we get, and even like people would DM me on Instagram, right? It's like, should I stop running if I have an injury? So what do you say to that, Dr. Nicole?
Yeah. So, literally the question is, can I run with an injury? And of course you can run with an injury, right? We saw it yesterday during the New York Marathon, right? Like one of my best friends ran with her big toe fractured. So, of course you can run with an injury. One thing that I learned as a physical therapist that treats primarily runners is you never tell a runner that they can't run. So, should you run with an injury? Maybe is a different question, but I would say there's very few and far between where you cannot run with an injury. And I think it's just important to understand that, you know, everything can be progressed and everything can be regressed. So even if you're injured, even if you're not feeling your 100%, something could always be better than nothing. And I just think that working with a physical therapist or to modify what you're doing or to add some strength training to complement what you're doing can make all the difference when it comes to running with an injury. So, the long story short of it is, if you take anything from this podcast, because I'm sure Duane and I are going to talk about a lot about this topic, but yes, you can run while injured. Absolutely.
All right. So the most common, you know, spot or the most common location of pain that's been kind of reported in the literature. And, a lot of people start to get this. And I actually just met with a client of mine who literally, since she started running during the pandemic, 2020, it's so funny, right? When people are like, oh, how long have you been running? Everyone says 2020. It's like, oh, I know it. Like,
So
you'll
funny.
never forget 2020, right? The year of the
Pandemic runners.
pandemic. And yeah, the year that people started running. Should you stop if your knees hurt?
No, you should not stop if your knees hurt. The knees, like you said, are probably the most common area of pain. Now, there's a lot of different things that could be going on, right? If your knees hurt when running, are you having like maybe a little bit of a meniscal tear? Are you getting that clicking in your knee? Is there some arthritis going on there? And are you having pain-free clicking? Are you having some lateral outside knee pain? Kind of, it depends on where is your knee pain, but the majority of the knee injuries that I see that are running related do not require you to stop running. I think the two big things that I want to bring up is it's really important to ask yourself, am I hurt or am I injured? And I think you alluded to this earlier in the podcast, Wayne, but as a runner, you're going to be sore a lot of the times. This is not, a smooth sailing journey that we're on here as runners. There's going to be times where you're very hurt, but there may be other times when you're legitimately injured. And I think it's important to ask yourself, am I hurt or am I injured? Does movement make me actually feel better? Can I kind of relieve some of this soreness, this sensation that I'm feeling by moving my body? Or is movement making this pain worse? And if it's the latter, if movement's making the pain worse, definitely seeking out skilled physical therapy or, going to a doctor of some sort could be a good solution for you. But most of the time, you're going to be able to still run despite your knees hurting. I think it's just important to ask yourself, am I hurt or am I injured? And then to complement that, if you are hurt, not injured, just making sure that, are we doing proper mobility training before running? Do we have a proper strength training regimen to complement that run? And these are all things that I think we should probably dive into deeper on this podcast, because strength training is a huge component of not only preventing injuries, but just making sure that, well, really just preventing injuries and making sure that you're a lifelong resilient runner.
Yeah, well, oh man, so much good there. I guess, yeah, I definitely want to, get your thoughts on strength training because that is certainly important. And just to kind of piggyback off of what you said with, the knee injuries, that, the most common, knee injury that runners will get is what we call runner's knee or patellofemoral pain syndrome. And, it is really hard to make this like really worse with running, and or really make this something that is going to be a long-term problem. And oftentimes the solutions are exactly what you just mentioned there in terms of strengthening certain muscles. In the rare case, sometimes it is some flexibility issues, perhaps with the quads, definitely not your hamstrings, people. So if you have tight hamstrings, don't worry, it's not causing your runner's knee. I just had to tell my client that today because she did think it was. And look at that, going back to our original capstone project, hamstrings, right?
Totally.
It's all coming full circle. So yeah, the knee injuries, and even just thinking about, because I know so many runners fear this, like when they feel this knee pain and they just like, oh my goodness, I'm having knee pain. You know what? Let's take a couple days off and then go back to running. Right, let me take a week off and then try it again. And then actually like makes the process worse and makes the condition worse, because now we've like shut things down, didn't allow the body to adapt to the demands of running. And, I just had, you mentioned New York City Marathon. I just had a client who ran the New York City Marathon with like, not only like some mild arthritis in her knee, like we're talking like max arthritis, right?
That's
Like we're
amazing.
talking like it's swelled up definitely during the training. And, whether or not, I would wholeheartedly recommend she run a marathon, but it was something that was a huge goal for her. She ran it for special cause that was near and dear to her heart, right? Like she had this on her calendar, on her schedule for like a year and a half because of how it got delayed with COVID and everything. So like she was running this thing, right? So it was my job to like make sure she got to the start line, and able to run and not have her knee like, totally blow up and swell up. And like she ran 26.2 miles with a
Incredible.
like really degenerative knee, right? And I've
That's
had other
amazing.
clients with like mild and moderate arthritis who, definitely run marathons and half marathons. So like if you are the middle-aged or the younger 20, 30-year-old runner who's having some like kneecap pain, like you're not going to do any long-term damage. And even like you had mentioned meniscal tears, and now the research, everything says like, even if you have meniscal tear, like surgery is actually not the best option for you. There are certain circumstances at certain parts of the knee that it may be recommended, especially if you're younger in your 20s and 30s. But for us middle-aged folks in my category, the 40-year-olds, right? 40 or 50-year-olds, like most likely we're not getting surgery anyway for torn meniscus. And usually running will not make that worse. So just to kind of double down on some of the knee stuff that you had talked about, because I know that's like it's a common worry for many runners, and I'm always, definitely having to educate on that. So if you are a runner listening and you are worried about those knees, listen to Dr. Nicole. She's going to share some tips here. So yeah, so why, let's talk about that strengthening, concept, and why is strengthening so important if we are having an injury? Like, wouldn't that just make my injury worse?
Yeah. So, people ask that all the time. And I think it's so important that we have the right perception of what strength training really means, right? So I guess there's this underlying thought that, oh, if I strength train, I must be, deadlifting 300 pounds. I must be a power lifter. And that's not necessarily what strength training is all about. You know, I think the key is that strength training has to complement what your sport is. So if we're talking about you being a runner versus you being a basketball athlete, that strength training that the runner does versus the basketball athlete might look a little bit different, right? So, as a runner, it doesn't mean that you're deadlifting your max weight. It doesn't mean that you're squatting every single day. It just means that we're adding in complementary movement patterns to your runs. So, let's take the runner who's running 5 days a week. If you think about running, where it's all forward, right? It's all in that forward plane. You're just going straight. We don't really think about those lateral movements a whole heck of a lot. And as a runner, like Duane said, a lot of the pain that we see in the literature and anecdotally is in your knees. So loading the patella tendon is researched to be one of the best ways that you can strengthen. That could be something as simple as doing, heels elevated squats, body weight even. It could be as simple as doing a reverse Nordic hamstring curl. It doesn't mean you have to be squatting your max weight. Additionally, when we talk about strength training for runners, we really want to focus on the glute strength. And research shows that to strengthen your glutes, one of the best exercises is to do a step up. So it doesn't mean, again, that you're squatting max weight. You could be holding a 10, 20-pound weight kettlebell, and you could be doing these step ups with your torso leaning forward to maximally isolate your glutes. So I just think that when it comes to strength training, it's important to recognize that you don't have to be the next bodybuilder. You don't have to strength train and be a power lifter. You just have to do weighted exercises, whether that be body weight, resistance, or some sort of loaded exercise, to focus on exercises that are going to complement what you're doing for your sport, which in this case is running.
Yeah, and just you had mentioned the glutes being important. Why is that important for runners?
Well, if you think about running, again, like you're running in the forward plane. So you're not really doing, especially we're talking about the gluteus medius muscle, which is a primary external rotator and abductor. And that's not necessarily a movement pattern. Like you're not, bringing your leg to the side, or you're not externally rotating, meaning like rotating your hip outward as a runner. So it's not often a muscle that is going to be overly strong in a running movement pattern, like in a walking or running movement pattern. So to strengthen it is only going to help your gait pattern, your running pattern, because running alone isn't going to keep that gluteus medius muscle as strong as we want it to be. And research shows, again, going back to the research, that having a strong gluteus medius muscle is going to help with the almighty knee pain that so many people have. When you have runner's knee, not only is it about loading your quad, but it's also about strengthening your glute, because we know that so much of knee pain has to do with the strength in your gluteus medius muscle.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for clarifying that. And I do find that, once we start strengthening that muscle, that the running form actually improves so much. And like, we analyze this on our client like Geet videos, right? And we're looking at their hip level. And usually we're finding that hip is dropping on the opposite side of the leg that they're standing on when they're running. And just, learning and teaching someone how to tap into that muscle, and so many runners just don't know, like they should have been using it, right? They just
Absolutely.
never knew. And like you said, it's not a traditional type of muscle or exercise that is even in like a standard boot camp class, right? Or even like some of the CrossFit classes, right? Like sometimes you don't really focus on that muscle at all. And as runners, we're always on one leg every single time we're running. There's never a time we're on two. So it's just that much important. And thank you for highlighting why, because I know you mentioned, the glutes are important in strengthening, but, sharing, why that is so important. Yeah. So you kind of talked about running knee injuries and how we usually don't need to stop running for those. Um, but what injuries should, we stop running? Or if you had an injury, like you were just still worried and you're totally not sold yet on what Dr. Nicole and I have been talking about, and you're like, but wait, like, shouldn't I be really careful? Are there certain injuries that we should actually stop running?
It's hard to pinpoint a specific injury where it's a point blank, do not run. I don't really like to say, oh, if you have this, don't run, because that just goes back to that fear mongering behavior. I don't think it's appropriate to say, well, if you have runner's knee, you need to stop running. Or if you have Achilles tendinopathy, you have to stop running. Or if you have a fifth metatarsal fracture, you need to stop running. I think it's more fair to ask yourself, okay, going back to that thing, am I hurt or am I injured? Okay, if you answer that question, you say, this sensation that I'm feeling is way more than an achy discomfort. This sensation is now really limiting my run to the point where maybe your form is compromised, to the point where you can't run at your pace that you want. You can't even run, and you're in your pain threshold. It gets to be more of that moderate to severe amount of pain. That's probably your body saying, hey, something's going on. This is not something that you should run through. Instead, something should be modified here. Either modify your pace, modify the distance that you're running, or change something about how you're running, or add a dynamic warm up, or again, add some strength components to what you're doing so that you can continue to run without taking some time off. I think is a better way to think about it, versus saying, if you have X, Y, or Z injury or diagnoses, don't run. Because there's a lot of instances where, you can have, let's say, Achilles tendinopathy. And you can totally run on that. You could run miles upon miles on that. But then there could be another instance where that Achilles tendinopathy is way more than a moderate level of pain, to the point where you're limping and you're really suffering. That, is it really worth running on? I'm not sure. That's where the runner's judgment might come into play, or where you may just need to seek out a physical therapist or an orthopedist to get some greater clarity. So I don't think that there is a specific diagnosis where you should not run. I mean, obviously, if you've torn your quad, or you have a full muscle tear, and you've just had surgery, that's a whole other story. But when we're just talking about generalized diagnoses like the runner's knee, Achilles things, even labral tears, it's kind of a gray area, to be honest with you, Duane.
Yeah, no, I thank you for highlighting that. And there's so much that I agree with in that statement, as far as, you know, most of the diagnoses, we can't just go on the diagnoses, right? And I guess really what we're getting at, the crux at here, is that what Nicole is talking about, and for those that have heard previous episodes, you guys kind of know my thoughts on this topic. But it's always good to hear like someone else's thoughts. Is, you know, probably the majority of you, I don't know what the percentage is, but especially if you live in probably a higher population center, you're going to be able to find a PT like Nicole, like myself, right, that are going to really critically analyze this injury. We'll put that in air quotes, and see, do we actually need to stop running, or can we just modify what this runner is doing and still actually heal from this incident, this injury, this. And a lot of the things that we had talked about that Nicole mentioned, like the Achilles tendon or the runner's knee, all of these are kind of more overuse type injuries that really relates to load. And we can kind of get into that conversation. But as opposed to the, let's call them red flag, injuries. And, I think we'd be remiss to not mention that, like you said, if you have severe pain and you like literally can't run and you're in a 9 out of 10 pain, then yeah, you definitely need to get checked out by a medical professional. Again, I would highly recommend you seek one out that is familiar with working with runners, either is a runner themselves or really works with a lot of runners, because they will be able to differentiate between right, like, is this something that really needs to be shut down? Because I think, going back to your statement that you mentioned before, is that as runners, like, we don't want to be told to stop running. And I do come into contact with a lot of people who reach out that basically tell me, like, I'm not going to get checked out because I know they're just going to tell me to stop running. So I think if it's severe pain, then yes, we need to get this checked out to make sure that it's not something that, yeah, you're probably not going to be doing yourself any good from a healing standpoint if you're at a 9 out of 10 pain, right? And you're in this like acute level pain. You had mentioned Achilles before. I would say 80, 90 to 95%. In my audience, my community, I would say probably 95% are going to have that more chronic-y, overuse Achilles pain. But hey, you could be a high school or a collegiate, track athlete or cross country athlete, and you just got this sudden onset of Achilles pain, and now it's really irritable. You're in a lot of pain, and they're swelling. Then yeah, running is not going to help you, right? In that case, so kind of giving some of that context is, I think, key. So severe pain, the other ones I think about, Nicole, are really like, is it a stress fracture, right? And is this that sharp pain that's been kind of building up, and it is really just related to loading? And it's like, when you don't load them, and maybe even walking might start to be painful now, but it started just with running, and then now it's walking. And if you have them do other movements like a squat or a lunge, or getting up from a chair doesn't hurt, but then you have them hop on one leg and it's like localized sharp pain in that area, then I'm like, okay, let's get this checked out, right? Like, let's, see if this is possibly like a bone stress injury. And yeah, if we do keep running with the bone stress injury, it's just going to progress. That being said, I've known many runners who have had some of these bone stress stuff in their foot, and they are able to actually modify things and offload that area and still run. Not that I'm saying I recommend that, but I've heard stories of that. And then the other one I think about too, Nicole, is like, severe like nerve injuries, right? Like, something that's like burning, type pain and like numbness and tingling. And it's not common in the running, community, but I feel like, we'd probably do our due diligence to be like, hey, if there's like an active nerve compression going on, and or someone has really degenerative spine and they have this, acute onset of sciatica, and it's like zinging down their leg every step they take, because of the compression that's happening in their spine. Those are the things where it's like, all right, we got to maybe, not run for a little bit, definitely get some treatment, and then gradually work into that. Not to say like you can never run again, but those are like the instances I've come into contact with. I don't know. Is there any other ones that you've come into contact with where you're like, you know what, I rarely say this to someone, but you know what, I really do think we need to take a little break, whether it's a couple days, whether it's a week. Obviously, if it is something that someone gets imaging on and it is a bone, stress fracture, then a lot of times they're going to put you in a boot. So then now we're talking like 4, 6, 8 weeks, depending upon the physician. Any others that I missed that you would say?
No, I think you brought up really good ideas there. And one thing I want to also say to the listeners on that topic, and to piggyback on what you just said, is a lot of times, people want to self-diagnose themselves, right? And I definitely highly suggest going to see a physical therapist. Most states, by the way, we have direct access, which means you can go straight into a physical therapist office without seeing your physician first. Um, but if you are that type of person that's like so like, I'm going to self-diagnose myself and figure out if I can run, I think it just goes down back to the fact of, does movement make this worse? And, if you have a stress fracture, walking is going to be pretty painful. Movement's going to make it worse versus, if you have, I don't know, if you have, even a low grade muscle tear, sometimes movement, actually running, is going to make it better because you're going to be contracting that muscle and you're going to be bringing blood flow to that muscle. And what do we need to heal? We need blood to heal. So, movement, purposeful movement, can actually make it better. So, I think back to Duane's red flags, a red flag you can think of, okay, if I'm moving and it's getting worse, it's probably a sign that I need to not self-diagnose anymore. I actually need to go in and get some treatment. So that's a really simple way that you can think about it at home as, is this really severe? Should I really stop running? Like, do simple movements make this painful? Yes. Okay, then I need to stop running and seek out medical care.
Yeah, no, great point. And I guess let's take it to the next step, right? Because yeah, we're definitely going to advocate that we get, examined by a professional, right, and get some treatment, as you mentioned. Um, so we covered kind of those instances where, yeah, we're going to probably recommend not running, but is it okay to run with an injury? Let's say we don't have those, right? Those kind of red flaggish type of things. You mentioned blood flow. So I kind of like that. So I'm thinking like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? If we're running, we're actually increasing blood flow to the area. And even for some joint problems, we actually feel better with movement, right? For someone who has like mild hip arthritis or mild knee arthritis or a stiff ankle, right? They're probably going to feel, better with some movement. And even like use the Achilles example. I know myself, having had that as a middle-aged runner, it is like the first couple of steps you start feeling it. But then if I do this, Nicole, like the middle of my run, I just stop and I do some gentle isometrics, like on my toes, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, get like some movement in the tendon, get some blood flow, like isolate kind of my Achilles and my calf muscles in kind of turning on, then it's like literally 20 or 30 seconds, and then I'll just start running and I'm like, oh, it's gone. Okay, cool. Like it's just amazing like how that happens. So is that, one of the reasons why you would say it would be like okay to run with an injury if we've kind of gotten it checked out to make sure it's not something that like, hey, we need to, yeah, shut it down for a little bit, which is very rare, by the way. And the blood flow kind of rationale, or is there any others that you would say?
Yeah, so a couple things on that topic. I always tell my clients, I have this slogan, this mantra, and I always tell people, let's train around pain, not through pain and not avoiding pain. It's like my mantra. If you've ever been to
I
Body in
love it.
Motion, you know I say that.
Yeah, I love it.
And thanks. And to your point too, like with Achilles stuff, if you just stop in the middle of your run and just do some heel raises, that's going to feel really good, right? Because you're loading the tendon to some degree. If you have a joint issue, or if you feel like you're arthritic in nature, or your joints are so stiff, doing things called CARs, controlled articular rotations, are going to feel so good for you before you hop into that run. So if it's your hips, just doing these hip circles, just to lubricate and get that joint moving before you run, or even in the middle of your run, like you mentioned, Duane. Or if it's your ankles always feeling stiff, your mobility isn't great there, doing these CARs, these ankle circles before you get into running is going to feel so good. But if it's a more muscular issue, right? If your muscle is tight or your muscle is weak, or if your muscles just aren't getting great blood flow for some sort of reason, actually using those muscles is going to help more than anything. So, like you had mentioned, isometrics. Let's say it's your hip, right? So doing an isometric, just pushing that hip into the wall. I call it an isometric wall lean. So pushing that hip into the wall before you get running. Or if it's your glutes that have trouble firing, right? Sometimes people call it glute amnesia. Maybe you just do some butt squeezes before you get into running. If it's your quad, maybe you just squeeze your quad, or even do some leg lifts before you start running. We need blood flow to heal. It is such an important topic when it comes to recovery and healing. So I definitely think that whether it be a joint problem or a muscle problem, noticing, okay, yep, it's the joints, that's what's stiff. Okay, I'm going to like just do some mobility for these joints. Or, yep, nope, it's my muscles that are really sore. I'm going to do some dynamic mobility before I get to running. So just noticing where is the issue? Is it a joint issue or is it a muscle issue? And then really addressing that before and or during the run so that you can continue to run with very minimal to no pain is going to be essential.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember way back when I shared with you as a student kind of my story of my hip surgery.
Oh yeah, I
That
remember.
yeah, that your husband had the labral tear,
Yep.
and yeah, so I got a stiff hip, and you know when my hip is, I'm starting to feel like a little of that pinching in the front of my hip. I'm getting down on the floor. I'm doing my hip mobility. I'm doing my hip circles. I'm making sure that I'm activating my glute, after that mobility before my runs. So it is so important. And, beyond the physical things, kind of getting to like, does running actually help with injuries? I thought you brought in some great points there about, muscle activation, blood flow, and movement. But I also see that, for many runners, where this is our sport as adults, right? Most of us probably played a sport, right, in our teens, and most of us are probably not playing a sport in our 40s. I'm going to go 30s, 40s, 50s, right? And a lot of runners tell me, like, I ask them this question every time we start working together because I want to know what is their why, right? Because it's so important when we're working together. If they have a goal of running their first half marathon, or they want to, get a PR in a marathon, like they got to have a strong why. And so many runners tell me, the mental benefits of running, the mind clearing benefits, the stress reduction. It helps them manage stress. Some busy moms, it's like, it's my only time alone, right? It's my time, and it's my time I could just clear my head. And I think, just having the idea of going to a medical practitioner and they diagnose you with any of the conditions you mentioned, let's throw in IT band, because I don't think we said it today, IT band syndrome. And they're like, you have IT band syndrome. Okay. They diagnosed you, and yes, it is IT band. And then to just go to that next step and say, like, well, you got it running. So we need to stop running until this heals, and then you can go back to running. Like, I do think that is such a disservice, not only from a tissue healing standpoint, which we've kind of talked about so far, but even the mental aspect. And when you take someone who this is their form of exercise, that they get that stress relief that makes them go right, and is more productive as a busy working mom, or running their company, right? Or being an entrepreneur, whatever, being a leader in their organization. Like, running is the thing, right? That gives them so they can do what they love. And to just take that away from someone. And I know you work with a lot of active adults and athletes, what are your thoughts on that? Like, I find that just so detrimental to the process of trying to actually promote recovery.
Yeah, it is one of my biggest pet peeves when a runner comes to me basically distraught because another medical provider told them that they can't run. When that is, like you said, their stress relief, that is their mental clarity. Another mantra that I have at my office is I always tell people some movement is better than no movement at all. And if it means, you're going out for a run every day because that's all you can fit in and you only have 30 minutes and that's your choice of exercise, you go do that. I am a huge believer in movement being medicine, and I cannot stand people putting down movement and saying not to move when that is the very thing that makes you feel good. So, to your point, I 100% agree that if it's what you love, we should find a way to keep you doing what you love. At Body in Motion, that's what we do. We treat performance-based athletes and we get them back to doing what they love as soon as possible. I even get people that come to me and they're like, I stopped running. I haven't run in 2 weeks because my orthopedist told me not to run. I don't know what to do with myself. I'm like, let's go out for a run. You and I together. I have my running sneakers on. Let's go. We're running. And I proved to them that it's possible. Like, we can still do this. And there was no point in stopping running. I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020 if they stopped running, but there's no point in stopping when everything can be modified. Everything. So I just think it's really important to find a great medical provider that you really vibe with and that you really feel supports you and your goals. One thing I'll say to that point is we know that physical exercise is a stressor on the body. So many of my clients will tell me they do run, they do X, Y, and Z exercises as a stress reliever, but physical activity is a physical stressor on the body. So playing devil's advocate, yes, exercise is a physical stressor on the body, but it's also a mental relieving stress on the body. So finding that balance is also really important because we know that when we're dealing with injuries, mitigating stress, whether it be, making sure we're sleeping good, making sure that we're eating enough, making sure that we're not overloading our tendons and our body with too much stress is also important. So I think just one thing we do really well at our practice is making sure that we find that balance. So we allow our clients to get back to doing the things that they love while not over stressing during an injury.
Yeah, so there's a difference between like good stress, appropriate stress, and bad stresses, right, to tissues and getting over injuries. I love that you mentioned that. And so, kind of coming down our final stretch here, Nicole. This is the last question that we ask all guests. Is really, and today's topic is really running injuries. If you can change one thing about the misconception of running injuries, what would that be?
Oh, definitely the rice method. I think rice is so outdated. In fact, we all
Yes.
know now it's so outdated. And I think it's a huge misconception. Like, oh, I got injured during my run today. I'm going to go home and ice it immediately and compress it and elevate it and not do any movement because it hurts. Wrong, wrong. It's a huge misconception. In fact, the new acronym that has come out is peace and love. So, peace and love, it stands for protect, elevate, avoid anti-inflammatories, compression, and educate. That's peace. And then love is load, optimism, vascularization, and exercise. So, quite literally the opposite of rice, which is a huge misconception.
Oh, that's a great one. I haven't gotten that yet on the show. And for those of you who listened to my Achilles specific episode, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I did introduce them to the Peace and Love acronym. That was probably like over a year ago now of that episode. But yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up and not doing the old rest, ice, compression, elevation. So I love it. Nicole, like, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of runners out there who really resonated with your message. How can more of our healthy runner community connect with you, whether or not, they have a running specific injury or they're here locally in Connecticut? Can you just talk about like what you do from, an in-person standpoint, virtual standpoint, and how could we connect with you?
Absolutely. So, one of the best ways to kind of check out what we do here at Body in Motion is right on Instagram. We can be found at Body in Motion PT on Instagram. We have a ton of free content that ranges from, injury relief to how to prep for races and how to feel better about yourself. We talk all about health and wellness over at Body in Motion PT. My website is bodyinemotionpt.com, and we work with people all over the US into Canada. And now we have a client even from London now, which is super amazing. We work with clients remotely. So if you have had an injury in the past or you're recovering from an injury, but you really want to just level up your training, you want a strength training specific workout program that's individualized to you, where you'll get, 24/7 access to me as your physical therapist and wellness coach. We do have that program at Body in Motion. And then if you are local to Connecticut, our office, like we mentioned before, is in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and we serve the Farmington Valley and beyond. And we have every visit one-on-one and have access to our digital app for customized workout program for your home exercise program. So that's a little bit about us and where we're at. And we would love to connect with you if you have any running related questions about your injuries. Hit me up on Instagram, email me, and get in touch.
Yeah, no, you make some fun content. I always love watching your reels. They are very fun and very educational, I might add. And yeah, did you ever think, like, when we were talking, what, like probably 5 or 6 years ago, in class, that we would be like actually, working with clients in London? And yeah, it's been a wild journey since COVID, and it's pretty neat though how, we can impact, people all over the globe nowadays.
It's pretty amazing. I never would have thought it, but again, social media has its perks, and COVID, although it was an awful few years, it did lead to the growth of being able to reach out to people all over the US. And, that's how you have the ability to find such great running coaches like yourself and great physical therapists like myself, where you don't have to be siloed to just the providers in your local area. There's a whole breadth of knowledge out there, and you have access to it right at your fingertips, which is awesome.
Oh my goodness, I love it. I love it. I don't know if you remember, but we always just talk about in lecture, like, expand your breadth of knowledge. And, we had talked about podcasts back then, which was so weird, right? That like we are on my podcast now, and that was before I had a podcast. And you and I used to be like, oh, who do you listen to for podcasts? And you as a student were like so into podcasts. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I thought this was like only like, adult stuff, but
Yeah.
you as a college student were into podcasts. So That
Oh
was
my God, I
awesome.
listen to podcasts all the time. I'm a podcast listener big time myself, so it's how I get so much knowledge in my brain.
Exactly, right? Lifelong learning. Yes,
What it's all
yes.
about.
I love it. Yeah, this has been like super awesome for me, honestly, to have you on the show and just, seeing where you've gone from, new grad PT to growing as a clinician to, opening your own business that is, widely successful and, just seeing the content that you put out there for the public. I think it really embodies everything that we want to see as these change agents, right? As PTs heading out into the field. So this has been super special for me to be able to interview you on my show and see, things kind of come full circle here. And, thank you for sharing like all the valuable insight into running injuries. And I hope, the listeners, you guys really, took some points home, and hopefully it wasn't new information for you, but it's always good to hear it again and be reminded of it. Especially on the podcast here, we haven't had an injury episode in a while. I do have some planned for you though coming up. I haven't done like a specific injury one, Nicole, in like probably 6 months, I would say. I
Wow.
think posterior tib was like the last one, but yeah, we got some stuff in the bank, and we've been having a lot of marathon specific content during marathon season. So it's good to kind of get another PT's insight into running injuries and how we should approach them. And I love your approach of just kind of movement is medicine. And I love your name of your company, like Body in Motion, because
Get
if a
your
body
body in
is
motion.
in motion, then you're probably going to prevent a lot of the injuries going forward. And a body in motion can help heal a lot of these injuries as well,
I
right?
love that.
We got to start some new marketing slogans for your business.
That's amazing, Duane. Thank you for
No,
being
this
my
is
business mentor.
this has been awesome. Thanks again, Nicole, for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
It's my absolute pleasure, Duane. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and thank you to the listener for you guys listening during your run. Hopefully, you're out there crushing your run. If you're listening on the podcast or if you're watching the video version on our Spark Healthy Runner YouTube channel, I appreciate you guys. And if you learned anything or you liked anything here, hit that like button. Like, it'll just help this content get in front of more runners' eyes. Make sure you guys go ahead and follow Nicole's awesome Instagram account, Body in Motion PT. And as always, runners, let's maintain a strong mind, a strong body, and just keep running. Until next time.